Thank you for having me. I am from San Francisco. I'm here to talk about what is a social venture. It's interesting, this talk is about an hour, and I really want to pack it into like 15 or 20 minutes. What are the success criteria for a social venture versus a regular business? And what other kind of indicators are out there in the marketplace? What kind of momentum is out there that says that this is really happening? So just a little bit of my background. I was born a volunteer very quickly, daughter of a teacher and a Republican CPA. So what did I do after college? I went into marketing, because why would I do anything but go into marketing and make money for companies? But I was really interested in the sociological and psychological component of what connects people to what they need and what they want. So I was very fortunate. I worked for many agencies, and I had awesome clients like Microsoft, T-Mobile, Red Bull, the NBA. Basically anybody where I got to work with kids was kind of my favorite stuff. But all along the way, I was, probably like many people here, a frustrated nonprofit volunteer person. And I keep looking at you because I know you have felt the same way, Maurice. And I sat on boards and I volunteered, and I just kept wanting to do something different. And I didn't realize it, but I was watching the market. And around 2005, Red launched. I don't know if any of you know the product Red. And so I went, oh my gosh, there's something commercial that's going mainstream. This was also about the time that Al Gore gave his infamous talk on climate change. And so some things started to happen that started to tell me that things were getting interesting. So in 2007, when I had an opportunity to take a 3 month sabbatical from my job, I chose to go to the Global Fund in Geneva, Switzerland. They were a client of ours. We had done the positioning. They were a side project of the UN. They came out of the Millennium Development Goals. And I said, hey, can I come work with you guys for my sabbatical? And they said yes. And so then I did my job, like any normal person would do. The thing that was awesome and terrifying about that is that sparked me in the next 6-7 years of my life working with big NGOs and development organizations. And I went in knowing that I might be frustrated, but that I wanted to understand the language. And I knew that I was an outsider, and that even though I came in and said, you know, you guys really need to speed things up and make things happen, and you need to use more friendly language, that they weren't going to listen to me until I started to kind of talk their speak. And actually 2 years ago, I ended up at one of the ones that I thought, oh my God, they get it, they totally get it. It was Virgin Unite. So Richard Branson's organization, so his foundation. Richard Branson looks at marketplace gaps. He has a portfolio of 200 companies that are still in business. And he looks at really unique opportunities, and I thought, this is going to be it, this is going to be my life. But the foundation suffers from what every foundation and nonprofit suffers from: too many stakeholders, too many agendas. There was a portfolio of 200 companies that wanted to be involved and had different ideas. And I left frustrated. I also partially left because I wanted to come back to San Francisco. I was in New York at this point. But I came back, it kind of came full circle, fully back in the idea that business is really the path forward. And in the last 7 years, we've had a lot of really interesting things happen, which is what I want to talk about today. So what is a social venture? I kind of think you guys know, but does anybody want to just say what they think a social venture is? Come on, I know you guys know. Someone raise their hand. Okay, I'll tell you. So by using a dictionary definition, so social is obviously of or relating to human welfare. And the interesting thing is it's about an interdependency. A venture is obviously something that's daring. Hello, entrepreneurship, uncertain outcome. But the interesting thing about venture here and a social venture is it is about a business-based opportunity. There is a transaction. So it is a venture, something with an expectation of gain. So I mentioned I was going to talk about how we got here. I talked a little bit about this up front. So there's a massive history in philanthropy, right? Andrew Carnegie, the Rockefellers. So all these big business tycoons had their pet passions, and they took the money that they had created and they gave it back to art institutions and cultural events, and they gave massive amounts of it. And that really set the mindset around philanthropy and charity. And up until about 1970, philanthropy and charity, and it's still going strong, it hasn't gone away. But around 1970, something called corporate social responsibility started entering corporations. And that is, corporations started to get a little bit smart about recognizing that they could build brand value or business value if they started targeting their philanthropy in wise ways. Ways that would target their employee communities, that would target the resources or the vendors, their supply chain. So they just started getting smart and not just sort of applying, supporting their wife's favorite project or something that was totally tangential and completely non-related to the business. So CSR really took a foothold in the early 70s and 80s, and it is also still growing strong today. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with it, except the fact that it is not fundamentally tied to a bottom line. So a business will only give as much to its CSR initiatives as it feels like giving, quite honestly. And if it's going to scrape stuff off the top, and it's going to give to good causes, and an example would be the Pepsi Refresh project. Does anybody remember the Pepsi Refresh project? No, a couple people. So in 2009, Pepsi said that they were going to take all the money that they put into the Super Bowl, and they were going to develop, I think it was like community education, I can't remember, 4 big areas, and they were going to have month after month, they were going to have 25 winners of funding that would basically go to these really unique ideas that the community would vote on. So I think they spent like $25 million. So nobody remembers it, and that was only 5 years ago. So, I mean, it wasn't about their product. And they took $25 million and they gave it one time. So, do you think any of these organizations are still in existence? I mean, hopefully some of them are. But it's like sort of like one-shot fuel injections that don't necessarily have any long-term value. So then, roll into 2000, and social entrepreneurship really started to take hold. And some of these interesting organizations like Charity Water and Pencils of Promise started using more business-savvy techniques, and social enterprise sort of got a bit of a foothold. In parallel to this, there was, I mentioned the Al Gore climate change speech. Green products were really, especially I lived in San Francisco, actually there was some of this in LA, like the hippie movement, the granola products, the organic and healthcare in Austin, Texas, and Boulder, they really started to come to the forefront of these fringe communities. Well, Walmart started really moving that forward in 2000, and the mainstream really started picking up on these products of sustainability, primarily because we had a big flashing red light around our climate going off. So sustainability, Target started, I actually worked on Target's program, they started bringing projects to the forefront, Method launched. So there was all of this stuff happening from an operational standpoint, and then all this stuff happening from a philanthropy standpoint, that you add in the recession, and all of a sudden you have a lot of opportunity for social ventures to take hold. So you have crowdfunding, you have a whole population of people who were left out of work, you have a whole population, millennial group, people here, very few people here, a couple students, who are looking for jobs, and you have a lot of creativity out there, and people are recognizing there's another way to do things, and social ventures are now an avenue, a potential possibility for them to get out of the situation they're in. So what other evidence do we have that social ventures are really happening? Does anyone know Fast Company? Yes. Yeah. So it's been my Bible since it launched. It's an amazing magazine, I think, and it tends to be about new ideas, progressive business models. There's a lot of technology in there, a lot of human empathy and values-built companies that are in there. In 2003, 2008, they started the Social Capitalist Awards, which was kind of like the tech awards of the early 90s, when there was like these award categories that Microsoft and Apple and Yahoo always won. So we have these Social Capitalist Awards that were invariably going to 40 to 50 new businesses in education, human trafficking. You take any social issue, and they were giving an award out every year. And so, okay, social ventures are taking hold. A lot of these were nonprofits. There was maybe 10, 15% that were actual businesses. Well, Fast Company is now doing the 50 most innovative companies. And a couple of years ago, they stopped doing the Social Capitalist Awards. But if you look inside the 50 most innovative companies, about 10 of those, 10 to 15 every year, is a company that's focused on social benefit as a major mission of what they're doing. So in my mind, social benefit companies have really hit the ground and are running if they're now within Fast Company's 50 most innovative companies every year. Some of these that have been on the list, Tom's Shoes, you probably know them, started in 2006. Basically buy a pair of shoes, give a pair of shoes to a needy community. Warby Parker took the same idea. They launched in 2010. They're about fashionable eyewear and basically buy a pair, give a pair to somebody in need. And then Revolution Foods, I don't know how many of you have kids and may know of them. They are about, did I see a hand? Yeah, so Revolution Foods was started in the Bay Area by two moms, of course, not that long ago, 2008, I think. And they were having a venture investor, yes. And they're on track to become $1 billion company because they created healthy foods, kid-designed foods for school districts. And they've taken that lunch product and they've packaged it, and you can now find it on your grocery store shelves. So again, more evidence that social ventures are kind of going big and going global. These are both $1 million companies, by the way, or all three of them. More than $1 million. They're multi-million dollars. Yeah, they're billion. Sorry. Kind of zeros off there. So social venture business structures, there's essentially three of them, and I'm mostly going to talk about one. There's the leveraged nonprofit, there's the hybrid nonprofit, and then there's just a social business. A leveraged nonprofit, and the best examples are those using online platforms. So it's a nonprofit. You all know Kiva, you know that they go through banks, they use their own technology platform, but they use a microfinance framework that was created by financial institutions. A hybrid nonprofit is a little bit more complex, and where did you go? The guys that I was talking to earlier with Cure, with your pharmaceutical company, you guys have a bit of this structure set up. Grayston Bakery, it's a hybrid nonprofit is when your mission is very intertwined with your foundation. So for Grayston Bakery, they hire the hard to hire. And what they decided is the way to hire the hard to hire and train them and get them out of homelessness and drug abuse programs was to develop a bakery. So the bakery is their business, but their nonprofit angle is really the training and the hiring of these hard to hire. And incidentally, this is the bakery that provides the brownies to Ben & Jerry's. There are a lot of pharmaceutical companies out there doing this. And it's interesting because these organizations look at the pharmaceuticals that other companies aren't using anymore, and they take them and they reformulate them, or they figure out redistribution networks. So their redistribution is actually the financials that helps them find the populations and target the communities that need them. There's quite a few out there that are like that. And a social business is exactly like what it sounds like. It's essentially operating like a real business, except you have a set of frameworks, and for those of you that know the B Corps, you have a set of frameworks that protects you if you are bought by your mission and your reinvestment values. So for example, for Sustainable Harvest, which is a fair trade coffee importer, they partner with coffee growers, but they give them equipment, or they basically take the profits and they help reinvest them with these farmers. They train them, and this business is protected. Their profits will always be protected. They still have shareholder value, but I think it's 10% actually goes back to the farmers themselves so they can reinvest. So where do ideas for social ventures come from? For those entrepreneurs out there, and I would actually hope people have questions about this at the end, I think there are a ton of ideas by targeting people. So basically looking at slices of the population who are currently underserved. One way to think about it is families who are not currently in the financial institute or are not bankable right now. There are 60 million adults in the US alone who do not have access to normal financial credit, and the online, the offline, any of those normal services that we are used to, and the fees are tacked onto it. So they kind of get in this cycle of poverty. Well, there's an institution out there called Mango Money. They started 5 years ago, 2009, and they're in 6 countries now. So they have found a way to reorganize financial structure around lending money and giving money to consumers. It's interesting, American Express announced a division 2-3 years ago, and they're starting to be public with it, and they're calling this their growth platform. So they're going to relook at how they're lending money and what they're doing. And it's interesting, they're a premium brand, but they're kind of going back to their roots in the freight business in terms of looking at the mass and what more can we do for them. Autism. Ultra Network launched, one of their businesses is called Ultra Testing, and they launched 2 years ago. And they essentially looked at underemployed adults. So there's 1.5 million functioning adults on some spectrum of the autism scale. 80% of them are high functioning. Well, what are autism adults known for? So diligence, perseverance, high focus, and pattern testing. So they actually shop this business. So they shop them to agencies and any of those looking to do QA testing. And they have a 20% better return on investment. So they don't shop business saying, hey, can we help this unique population that is not employed, but they say, we can keep your workers on shore, we can give you 20% better return rate, and we can actually do it faster. Another interesting example, and I would probably throw you off here, because it's like, well, are these like an underserved population? No, this is actually a product. A human rights lawyer from South Africa was involved in the apartheid movement, basically came over from South Africa and said, you know what, if we can create a better world, we can solve issues of peace, if we look at secular communities or tribal communities who are at war with each other, if we give them a common purpose, if we train them, if we educate them, there is no longer a need to fight because there is a need for survival. So what he did is he built a haute couture business. He partnered with somebody who's well-known and understands fashion. They went and traveled the world looking for artisans, and they partnered with artisans. Because they're a haute couture business, they can bring a huge amount of the profits back. They can train these people, they can help productize their artisanship, and they basically bring community into these communities that had issues before. So there's lots of ways to think about underserved populations, both on the supply side and the demand side. Other things to think about if you are an entrepreneur in need of an idea with a social benefit lens is look for a design flaw in the marketplace. Mike, you had a perfect one. So why are there so many repairmen out there? Why aren't people repairing their own equipment? So that's an example of a marketplace that's fundamentally flawed, and there's an opportunity to bring a social benefit business to it. Is there a new need? And we talked about the underserved. So there's lots of new needs out there. And then is there a current channel or organizer? So kind of like Ultra Testing, who found a channel for autism adults to work. There's a really interesting business out there called Convict Communications, and they're a telemarketing business. So what they have is a pool of highly motivated people who are highly focused and who can be easily trained. And they, again, promote themselves as a native English-speaking business with a high efficiency rate. And so they shop their business, and what you're doing is you're basically giving, obviously, prisoners hope, you're giving them skill, and you're giving them a place in society, all from the comfort of their prison. I know, it's weird that the opportunities are out there. So a couple social venture success criteria. These are very different. And again, I had a conversation about this earlier. The criteria for success as a social venture they're somewhat the same, but it's really important that you look hard at this business. You are not going into a charitable business. And this is the hardest thing for people to understand is because it's good for the world, therefore I should exist. If you think about the honey bee hive, there's a lot of investment. The mother bee, the queen bee, and her workers go out and they look for a solid branch to hang on to. They look for the right conditions. They make sure that they have a labor force and the labor force is coming with them. Yes, a big wind could come along, a cat could jump on it, anything could happen, but they have a really solid, sustainable business plan. One of the reasons that I say this is I advise a lot of social entrepreneurs, and they're in wanderlust with this amazing idea that they have, but they haven't, and they launch and they have not done their research. Along the same lines is you must have a value proposition for a social venture to succeed. It must succeed on the basis of its performance. It must have true value. It must have badge status. People need to know about it. So it needs to be kind of like the Nike of whatever your world is. Or maybe it doesn't need to be the Nike, but it needs to be the something, and it needs to stand alone on its own merit. It needs to be scalable. And, I was recently challenged on this, and I actually don't know if it necessarily needs to be scalable. I think if you want to be wealthy and you want to have a big investor, you should be scalable. But there are lots of businesses doing really good things in small ways. There's an organization in San Francisco called La Cocina, and it essentially trains migrant female culinary experts. So basically they came over here as cooks, and it gives them all of the business sense they need to launch a business. They have no intention of going big. They want to start different La Cocinas in different cities, but they don't feel like they have the same opportunity to scale. So it's an interesting question. However, actually, let me go back and say, however, there are venture capitalists out there who are investing in big ideas. Revolution Foods was one of those. Plum Organics was one of those. And there's a couple other out there that are on the block to be sold, and that venture capitalists have taken a look at. And then it's got to be long term. This is the other thing, and again, a conversation that I was having earlier. So this isn't a 3 to 5 year idea and then I'm going to sell it. Some of them do end up like that. Plum Organics, which was a baby food company, organic baby food, that launched in 2009, was sold to Campbell's Soup a year ago. At that point, it was already the #2 baby food in America. So not just organic, #2 baby food. So certainly you are going to have more success if you're scalable. Certainly they had immediate success within 3 to 5 years, which is what every entrepreneur wants. But you really need to think long term. There are a lot of proactive companies out there, and again, I've talked to a couple of you earlier. There are a lot of preventative companies. There are a lot of people with really great new ideas that need to take the time to understand their markets and to understand why the infrastructure and the current dynamics don't support the business. So it's worth it to take your time because you're actually reshaping the market. And then I'll just talk about quickly here, and then we can get into questions. So what other evidence, what momentum is behind social ventures? Well, first of all, there's a lot of people out there who need work and who have great ideas. Because of the Great Recession that we all know about, there are a tremendous amount of people with ideas, and now because of crowdfunding platforms, there are people out there making these ideas happen. This is not something to be ignored, and what are we, 5 years later? This is still a significant factor in terms of who is starting social ventures and who has been touched enough to start a social venture. There are still a ton of marketplace gaps, and the easiest and the most obvious to point to are the environmental gaps. I am proposing that you actually look at underserved populations as well, but a lot of our environmental gaps have created these design flaws. Pierre Omidyar was the founder of eBay, and he is now the founder of the Omidyar Network, which is basically a venture fund. And they've done some really interesting things. They've really created a cohesive platform. They focus in 5 or 6 different areas, and they fund both nonprofits and for-profits in sort of like cohabiting in areas like government, disease prevention, technology is one of them, a mobile platform, health is another one. So they are out there funding amazing ideas and have had a tremendous amount of success. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, I'm sure you've all heard of, and what's interesting about them is they fund big ideas as well, and they'll fund a lot of nonprofits and a lot of crazy ideas, but the fact that these two guys are out there funding like this, and that was only, 10 years ago, 20 years ago that they both started doing this, the market has a long way to go. You all know funding platforms, I talked about those. Some other things that are happening at a really macro level, the Global Impact Investing Network. I had the great honor to help develop their positioning. 5 years ago, they were an output of the Rockefeller Institute and the Monitor Group.